daughter once handed her mother a peculiar painting. Its imagery so unsettling, it lingered like a shadow in her mind. Days later, the girl vanished without a trace. Every lead ran cold, and the mother's world froze in that moment of terror. Then, 14 years later, Mother found the same painting. But what it revealed would unravel a truth so horrifying that even veteran investigators would describe it as the most disturbing case of their careers. The summer of 2014 was supposed to be a fresh start for Ellen Harper. After a bruising divorce that left her heart as raw as an open wound, she'd packed up her life and her 7-year-old daughter Lila, fleeing the concrete chaos of Chicago for the quiet of Willow Creek, Indiana. The town was a postcard of Middle America: tidy lawns, white picket fences, and the endless drone of cicadas on humid July nights. Their new home, a century-old craftsman with peeling yellow paint and creaky floors, felt like a promise. A place to rebuild. A place for Lila to grow up safe, her brown curls bouncing as she chased fireflies in the backyard. But 6 months later, Lila was gone. Vanished from her bedroom in the dead of night, her window ajar, her stuffed rabbit still tucked beneath the covers. The police scoured fields, dragged the muddy banks of Willow Creek, and questioned every neighbor. They found nothing. No footprints, no witnesses, no trace. Ellen's world collapsed, frozen in the moment she pushed open Lila's door to find an empty bed. The silence screaming louder than any nightmare. For 9 years, she carried that weight. Her life, a hollow echo of loss. Then, one humid August morning in 2023, Ellen climbed into the attic and found something that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her daughter's disappearance. The attic air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust and old wood, as Ellen gripped the splintered rungs of the pull-down ladder. Her knees ached, her palms slick with sweat as she climbed, each step creaking under her weight. She'd come up here to find an old photo album for Lila's memorial, a ritual she performed every year on the anniversary of her disappearance. The attic was a labyrinth of forgotten relics. Cardboard boxes sagging under their own weight, a cracked mirror leaning against a wall, moth-eaten blankets piled like graves. Sunlight slanted through a cracked skylight, casting jagged shadows across the floorboards, their edges sharp as knives. Ellen's breath hitched as her eyes landed on a familiar object. Lila's art box, a dented metal case covered in glitter stickers shaped like stars and hearts. It sat tucked beneath a pile of blankets, half hidden, as if waiting for her. She hadn't touched it since Lila vanished. The sight was a punch to the gut, but something pulled her forward, an instinct she couldn't name, like a whisper in the back of her mind. Her fingers trembled as she knelt, brushing dust from the box's surface. The stickers sparkled faintly, catching the light like tiny beacons. She pried open the latch, the metal squeaking in protest, a sound that pierced the attic's stillness. Inside were Lila's crayons, their tips worn to nubs from hours of coloring. A half-used sketchbook and a stack of loose drawings, their edges curling like autumn leaves. Ellen's chest tightened as she lifted the first sheet. Lila's childish scrawl filled the page. Bright swirls of red and yellow, a sun with a crooked smile, a tree with lopsided branches. Innocent, joyful, the kind of art a mother frames and hangs above the mantel. But as Ellen flipped through the stack, the drawings changed. The colors darkened, blacks and grays, jagged lines like cracks in glass. One showed their house, its familiar gabled roof unmistakable, but a single window glowed an unnatural red, like blood pooling behind glass. Another depicted a forest, its trees black and twisted, with a tall, featureless figure standing at the edge, its silhouette stark against a gray sky. The final drawing stopped Ellen's heart. It was Lila, unmistakable in her pink pajamas, her brown curls sketched with careful wobbly lines. She was holding hands with the faceless figure, and above them, in shaky, uneven letters, Lila had written, "He's coming." Ellen's knees buckled. She sank onto the attic floor, the paper crumpling in her grip, the art box tipping over with a clatter that echoed like a gunshot. Her heart pounded, each beat sending a fresh wave of nausea through her, her vision blurring at the edges. Lila had drawn these weeks before she vanished. Ellen's mind raced back to those final days. Lila had been quieter, her laughter muted, her small hands clutching her stuffed rabbit even during the day. She'd woken screaming from nightmares she wouldn't describe, her eyes wide and glassy. Ellen had blamed the move, the divorce, the stress of a new school. She'd sat with Lila, stroking her hair, promising everything would be okay. But these drawings weren't the work of a stressed child. They were warnings, prophecies. Her fingers traced the words, "He's coming." And memories flooded back. The police interviews, the endless questions. Did Lila mention anyone strange? Did she act scared? Ellen had said no. Desperate to believe her daughter was safe in their new home. Now, staring at the drawings, she wondered if Lila had been screaming for help in the only way she knew how. The attic seemed to close in, the air growing heavier, the shadows sharper. Ellen shoved the drawings back into the box, her hands shaking so badly she dropped a red crayon, its tip rolling across the floor like a drop of blood. She needed to show someone. The police had closed Lila's case years ago, calling it a runaway or a tragic accident, their voices dripping with pity as they urged Ellen to move on. But these drawings were proof that Lila had seen something, known something. She scrambled down the ladder, the art box clutched to her chest, its edges digging into her ribs. In the kitchen, she grabbed her phone from the counter, her fingers hovering over the contact for Detective Mike Ramsey, the officer who'd handled Lila's case. He'd been kind at first, bringing her coffee during late-night interviews, but by the end, his patience had worn thin, his voice clipped as he told her to let go. She dialed anyway. "Ramsey," came his gruff voice after 3 rings. Ellen's throat tightened, words catching like thorns. "Mike, it's Ellen Harper. I found something. Drawings. Lila's drawings. They show things she couldn't have known." A long pause. She could hear the creak of his chair, the faint hum of an air conditioner in the background. "Ellen," he said, his tone heavy with pity. "It's been 9 years. Kids draw all kinds of things. It doesn't mean—" "No," she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended, cutting through the haze of her grief. "These aren't just drawings. She drew a man, a figure before she disappeared. She wrote, 'He's coming.' You need to see this." Another pause, longer this time, the silence thick with skepticism. "All right," he said finally, his sigh audible. "Bring them to the station tomorrow. But Ellen, don't get your hopes up." She hung up, her pulse racing, Ramsey's words echoing like a slap. "Don't get your hopes up." She'd heard them before, from neighbors, from her ex-husband, from her own mother. No one believed her then, when she'd insisted Lila wouldn't run away. No one believed her now. But as she spread the drawings across the kitchen table, their stark lines staring up at her like accusing eyes, Ellen felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. Certainty. These weren't childish scribbles. They were clues, and she would follow them no matter the cost. The kitchen clock ticked, each second louder than the last, slicing through the silence. Outside, the cicadas droned, their song rising and falling like a warning. Ellen's eyes drifted to the drawing of the faceless figure, its long arms reaching toward Lila's tiny hand. Her stomach churned. Who was he? A neighbor? A stranger? Someone Lila had seen in Willow Creek's quiet streets? Her mind spun, dragging her back to those final weeks. Lila staring out her bedroom window at night, whispering about the Shadow Man. Ellen had dismissed it as a childish fear, a story spun from too many cartoons. But now, those whispers felt like screams she'd failed to hear. She stood, her chair scraping against the linoleum, and crossed to the sink. Her reflection in the window was haggard, eyes sunken, blonde hair streaked with gray, her face carved with 9 years of grief. The drawings had ignited something new, not hope, but resolve. She would go to the station tomorrow, but she wouldn't stop there. If Ramsey wouldn't listen, she'd find someone who would. A private investigator, a journalist, anyone who could decode Lila's warnings. Because if these drawings were real, if they held the truth, then whoever took Lila might still be out there, watching, waiting. The house creaked, settling under the weight of the humid night. Ellen's gaze flicked to the back door, its glass pane reflecting the dark yard beyond. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow shifting at the edge of the lawn, tall and featureless, just like Lila's drawing. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. Just the wind, she told herself. Just the trees. But as she turned back to the drawings, the words, "He's coming," burned in her mind, and the silence of Willow Creek felt like a trap waiting to spring. The morning sun did little to warm Willow Creek, its light filtering through a haze of Indiana humidity that clung to Ellen Harper's skin like a second layer of grief. She stood in the kitchen, the art box open on the table, Lila's drawings spread out like pieces of a shattered mirror. The faceless figure in her daughter's final sketch stared up at her, its blank silhouette a void that seemed to pull the air from the room. "He's coming," Lila had written, the words scrawled in black crayon, uneven and urgent. Ellen's fingers hovered over the paper, afraid to touch it, as if it might burn her. The shadow she'd glimpsed last night in the backyard lingered in her mind, tall and formless, just like the figure in the drawing. She told herself it was nothing, a trick of the light, a branch swaying in the wind, but her pulse hadn't slowed since. Sleep had been impossible, the house creaking through the night, each sound a reminder of Lila's empty bedroom down the hall. Ellen forced herself to move, gathering the drawings into a manila folder. She needed answers, and Detective Mike Ramsey was her only starting point, even if his pitying tone from yesterday's call still stung. The drive to the Willow Creek police station was a blur, the town's quiet streets mocking her with their normalcy. Kids on bikes, a mail carrier whistling, a lawnmower droning in the distance. The station itself was a squat brick building, its flagpole rusted, the American flag fraying at the edges. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. Ramsey was waiting at the front desk, his gray hair thinning, his eyes heavy with the weight of too many cases. "Ellen?" he said, his voice softer than on the phone, but still laced with skepticism. "Let's see what you've got." She slid the folder across the desk, her hands unsteady. Ramsey opened it, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the drawings. The sun with its crooked smile, the house with its blood-red window, the forest with its twisted trees, and finally, Lila holding hands with the faceless figure. He lingered on the last one, his fingers tracing the words, "He's coming." Ellen watched his face, searching for a flicker of belief, but his expression remained unreadable. "Kids have wild imaginations," he said finally, leaning back in his chair, the springs creaking under his weight. This could be anything. A nightmare, a story she made up. Ellen's jaw tightened. Lila wasn't like that. She didn't draw things like this before we moved here. These were from the weeks before she disappeared. She was trying to tell me something. Ramsey sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ellen, I know how hard this is, but we searched every inch of this town back then. We interviewed neighbors, teachers, even your ex-husband. There was nothing. No evidence. No suspects." His voice softened, but it felt patronizing, like he was speaking to a child. Sometimes kids just slip away. An accident, a stranger passing through. These drawings don't change that. Ellen's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't slip away, Mike. Someone took her. And these drawings prove she was scared of something, someone. Why won't you listen? Her voice cracked, drawing the attention of a young officer at a nearby desk, who quickly looked away. Ramsey closed the folder, sliding it back to her. "I'll make a note of it, okay? But I can't reopen a case without new evidence. Real evidence, not drawings." He stood, signaling the conversation was over. Ellen wanted to scream, to shake him until he saw what she saw, but she grabbed the folder and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The summer air hit her like a wall, thick and suffocating, as she climbed into her car. Ramsey's dismissal burned, but it only fueled her resolve. If the police wouldn't help, she'd find answers herself. Back home, Ellen spread the drawings across the living room floor, the afternoon light casting long shadows over the hardwood. She studied each one, searching for details she might have missed. The house with the red window? Had Lila seen something outside her room? The forest? Willow Creek was bordered by dense woods, but Lila had never gone there alone. And the figure, that faceless man, his long arms reaching for her daughter. Ellen's stomach churned. She remembered Lila's whispers about the shadow man, words she'd dismissed as childish fears. Now they felt like a plea she'd ignored. She needed more context, more of Lila's world from those final weeks. Her gaze fell on a cardboard box in the corner, one she hadn't touched since the move. Lila's school things, notebooks, report cards, art projects. Maybe there was something else, another clue. The box was heavier than she expected, its contents shifting as she dragged it to the center of the room. Dust coated her fingers as she tore it open, revealing a jumble of spiral notebooks and glitter-glued crafts. At the bottom was a small journal, its cover decorated with Lila's favorite flower stickers. Ellen's heart skipped as she opened it, recognizing her daughter's loopy handwriting. Most pages were filled with doodles, hearts, stars, a clumsy sketch of their cat. But one entry, dated 2 weeks before Lila vanished, stopped her cold. "The shadow man came again," Lila had written. "He stands by the window. He says he'll take me to a new home. I don't want to go." Below the words was another drawing, cruder than the others. A window with a red curtain, and outside the same faceless figure, its head tilted as if watching. Ellen's breath caught, her hands trembling so badly the journal nearly slipped from her grip. Lila had seen someone. Not a nightmare, not a story. A real person watching her through her bedroom window. The room spun, the walls closing in as Ellen's mind raced. Who could it have been? A neighbor? The mail carrier who always lingered too long? The maintenance man who'd fixed their furnace that fall? She'd never trusted him. His eyes too sharp, his smile too forced? Or was it someone she didn't know? A stranger hiding in Willow Creek's quiet streets? She stumbled to Lila's old bedroom, untouched since the disappearance, the air stale with disuse. The window was still there, its latch loose, the red curtains faded but intact. She pressed her palm against the glass, imagining Lila's small face staring out into the dark, seeing him. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to the present. A text from her ex-husband, Tom, who'd moved to Ohio after the divorce. "Heard you called Ramsey. Stop chasing ghosts, Ellen. It's killing you." She stared at the words, her anger flaring. Tom had given up on Lila years ago, remarried, started a new family. He'd called her paranoid then too when she'd begged him to keep searching. She typed a reply, "This isn't about you," then deleted it, her fingers shaking. Tom didn't matter. The drawings did. The journal did. The shadow man did. The house creaked, a sound she'd grown used to, but now felt ominous, like footsteps on the stairs. Ellen crossed to the window, pulling back the curtain to scan the backyard. The grass was overgrown, the swing set rusted, its chains swaying in the breeze. For a moment, she saw nothing but the familiar shapes of trees and shrubs. Then, at the edge of the woods bordering their property, a shadow moved. Tall, formless, gone in an instant. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her breath fogging the glass. Was it him? The man from Lila's drawings, still watching, still waiting? Or was her mind, frayed by grief and sleepless nights, conjuring ghosts? The journal lay open on the bed, its words screaming what no one else would hear. The shadow man was real, and he was closer than she thought. The Willow Creek air was heavy with the scent of rain, the sky bruised with gray clouds as Ellen Harper stood frozen at Lila's bedroom window, her breath still fogging the glass. The shadow she'd glimpsed at the edge of the woods lingered in her mind like a stain, its shape too close to the faceless figure in her daughter's drawings. The journal lay open on Lila's bed, its words, "The shadow man came again. He stands by the window," burning into her like a brand. 9 years ago, Ellen had dismissed Lila's fears as childish imagination, but now each whisper, each sketch, felt like a scream she'd failed to hear. Her hands shook as she clutched the journal, its flower sticker cover a cruel reminder of her daughter's innocence. Detective Ramsey's dismissal at the station yesterday had been a slap. But this new clue, this proof of a watcher in the night, was something he couldn't ignore. She wouldn't let him, but first she needed more. Something concrete to force the police to listen, to prove the shadow man was real. Ellen's eyes drifted to the backyard, where the rusted swing set creaked in the rising wind. The woods beyond were dense, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers, hiding whatever, or whoever, had been watching. Her mind raced, sifting through memories of 2014. Lila had been 7, shy but curious, always sketching, always watching the world with wide, thoughtful eyes. Ellen remembered a neighbor, Mr. Carver, who lived in the small ranch house across the street. He'd been in his late 50s then, a retired mechanic with a limp and a habit of lingering too long when he waved at Lila playing in the yard. Ellen had thought him harmless, just a lonely old man who liked kids. But now, the memory of his sharp eyes and slow smile made her skin crawl. Had Lila seen him watching her window? Was he the shadow man? She crossed to the living room, where Lila's drawings, still lay scattered across the floor, their dark lines stark against the hardwood. The house with the red window, the forest, the faceless figure, they all pointed to something specific, something Lila had been desperate to communicate. Ellen grabbed her keys and the journal, her resolve hardening like steel. If the police wouldn't help, she'd start with Carver. He'd been questioned back then, she vaguely recalled. But like everyone else in Willow Creek, he'd had an alibi, working late at his garage, or so he'd claimed. The street was quiet as she stepped outside, the air thick with the promise of a storm. Carver's house looked the same as it had 9 years ago. Faded blue siding, a sagging porch, a pickup truck rusted at the edges. His mailbox was stuffed with uncollected flyers, and the curtains were drawn tight, giving the house an abandoned feel. Ellen's pulse quickened as she knocked, the sound sharp against the stillness. The door creaked open after a long pause, revealing Carver's weathered face. His hair was thinner now, white as ash, and his limp more pronounced, but his eyes were still sharp, glinting like polished glass. "Ellen," he said, his voice gravelly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Been a while." She forced a smile, her stomach twisting. "I'm going through Lila's things," she said, holding up the journal, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Found some drawings, some writing. I think she was scared of something. Someone, before she disappeared. Did you ever see anything strange back then? Anyone hanging around our house?" Carver's smile faded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Kids go missing sometimes," he said, leaning against the door frame. "Terrible thing, but you can't blame the whole town. I told the police back then. I didn't see nothing." His tone was too casual, too practiced. Ellen's grip on the journal tightened. She wrote about a man watching her window. She pressed, watching his face for any crack in his composure. "A shadow man. You were always out front, working on your truck. You never saw anyone?" Carver's jaw twitched, almost imperceptible, but Ellen caught it. "Kids make up stories," he said, his voice tighter now. "Lila was always drawing, always dreaming up things. You're chasing ghosts, Ellen." He stepped back, starting to close the door. "I'm sorry about your girl, but I can't help you." The door shut with a soft click, leaving Ellen standing on the porch, her heart pounding. His words echoed Ramsey's, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease, that told her he was hiding something. Back home, Ellen couldn't shake the feeling that Carver knew more than he let on. She paced the living room, the journal open to Lila's chilling entry. "He says he'll take me to a new home." Her mind spun. Carver had lived across the street, his windows facing Lila's bedroom. Had he watched her, night after night, his silhouette burned into her daughter's nightmares? She needed proof, something to tie him to the drawings. The idea of sneaking into his house crossed her mind, reckless and desperate, but she pushed it aside. Instead, she turned to the internet, pulling up old property records and news articles from 2014. Willow Creek was small, its secrets buried in dusty archives and forgotten gossip. After an hour of scrolling, she found it. A brief article from the Willow Creek Gazette, dated a month before Lila's disappearance. Local man questioned in vandalism case. Carver's name was mentioned, linked to a string of broken windows in the neighborhood. The police had no evidence to charge him, but the timing was too close to ignore. Ellen's breath hitched. Broken windows. Lila's drawing of the house with the red window flashed in her mind. She dug through the manila folder, pulling out the sketch. The window wasn't just glowing. It was jagged, like shattered glass. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone, dialing Ramsey again. "Mike, it's Ellen," she said when he picked up, her voice urgent. "I found something else. Lila drew our house with a broken window, and there was a vandalism case back then. Carver, the neighbor. He was questioned. It's connected." Ramsey's sigh was audible, heavy with exasperation. "Ellen, you're grasping at straws. Vandalism's common in small towns. Doesn't mean he took your daughter." "Then look again," she snapped, her voice breaking. "Please, just check his alibi from back then." A long pause. "I'll pull the file," Ramsey said finally. "But this better not be another dead end." What happened next? To know, comment below for part 2 and subscribe to this channel.